Hi everybody, and thank you for joining us on this third module for the Mastering High Performance live stream. Our presenter today is Terry McCloy. Terry is an internationally recognised leadership and change expert and one of the most highly acclaimed leadership facilitators globally. He has led leadership forums and retreats all over the world and is recognised for his understanding of leadership in challenging times. He has also successfully led over 15 major organisational change initiatives and has done this through a focus on people and outcomes. As a result of this experience, Terry has distilled his leadership and change expertise into the highly acclaimed Leadership Essentials program. Terry founded Future Path International over 30 years ago, and today they are the leading providers of leadership development, coaching and change management within New Zealand and APAC. The Future Path National Coaching Centre is the largest in New Zealand, with over 15 coaches who work both nationally and globally. Future Path's promise is simply the best and nothing less. Terry has also been internationally recognised on a number of occasions and was awarded the CPI International Leadership Excellence Award for his contribution to change and transformation internationally. So I'd now like to hand you over to Terry, but just a quick reminder, if you do have any questions at all throughout this presentation, please pop them into the Q&A box and Terry will answer those for you. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jenny. As I said on the previous modules that we've been running, I always sort of, when I hear that introduction, I'm like, yeah, I wonder who that's about, but okay. So thank you for that. So one of the things that we've been talking about is the ability to master high performance and to be able to create your own practice around performance, around leadership. And in module 1, if you remember, one of the big things we talked about is the way in which we think. So it's reframing our thinking. And I was having a conversation last week with a client, and we were discussing one of the things that, the change that's happening in the world at the moment. And he was saying, oh, I think AI is going to be the big thing we got to focus on. And I said, well, yes and no. I think it's a big thing, but I think everybody has made it the biggest thing of all. I said, the problem we see at the moment with a lot of organizations is the inability to make decisions. People don't like making decisions anymore. They like gathering more information. Let's go on ChatGPT and get more information. Let's get a project team together and get more information. Interesting thing I was reading, there's a really great article that I was reading by Farnham Street, and what they were saying, is a decision made on about 85% of the information is pretty well right. And then there was an interview with Charlie Munger. Now, I don't know if any of you know Charlie Munger, but Warren Buffett's offsider was Charlie Munger. They were like twins, not related, but they built Berkshire Hathaway between them. And Charlie Munger says, look, the basic thing, what you've got to do is think differently about what it is that you're looking at, challenge it, make the decision, move on and learn from it, which is what we covered in our first module, the ability to reframe thinking. And Charlie went on, it was an interesting little sort of podcast that I was watching there from Charlie Munger, because he was then talking about the ability to look at performance in organizations. And he said, like, people get carried away with analysis. They get carried away with trying to get all of the information. And he said, if he goes into any organization and they spend a lot of time doing analytical, analyze this, analyze that, he said, don't worry about it, forget them. He said, he went into one organization and they spent a lot of time analyzing purchasing orders. And he's like, why? Look at the critical elements of the business that create the income of the business, where the core part of the business is, what they need to reframe for the future. That's what the business is about. And I thought it was a really interesting podcast because it flows into what we're talking about. And if you remember in module 1, we talked about E plus R equals O, event, response, outcome. And the great example with that was if somebody sends you, a really nasty email and you get ready. I am going to send them a reply and I'm going to whack it off right now. That's a reaction, not a response. And probably you're going to get a less than great outcome. If you type that email and put it into drafts, and the next day you reread it and go, is this the kind of email I want to send to get the outcome I want to get? And if the answer is no, you retype it probably. I mean, I've done that. You sit down and you go, okay, I really need to retype this email because the kind of outcome I'm going to get by sending that original email is not going to be good. So I think the whole thing that we're talking about around mastering high performance is looking at yourself and looking at some of the principles. Don't accept what a lot of people tell you. Make your own principles. Analyze what works for you. Throughout my career, I've been told many, many things, great, good advice. And I remember a number of years ago, when I was running a business in Wellington, this person started telling me all the things I should be doing. And I said to that person, I believe in what I'm doing. I believe in what I'm doing. What you're doing is trying to find reasons why I should not believe in what I'm doing. So thank you, but no thank you. Goodbye. Please don't give me any more good advice. I think the big thing that we tend to do is second guess ourselves. And one of the messages that we want to look at when we are building our high performance practice, mastering performance, is trust yourself. Trust yourself. There's this concept of self-trust. Do you trust yourself? A lot of people talk about intuition. Now, intuition to me is observed behaviors and events. It's not something you wake up one morning born with. It's something that you build over time. One of my crazy things is, if you want to know one of my crazy fascinations, I love sitting in airports watching people and then trying to analyze what they do, trying to analyze the kind of role that they would be in and the kind of things that they would be doing. Probably most of the time I get it wrong, but what it means is that I'm observing human behavior. I'm observing how people would act and react in certain situations. And that helps me build what many people will call my intuition. They go, oh, you're amazing because you are quite intuitive about things. You see things before they happen. And I go, sometimes. But sometimes it's really sitting down and analyzing it and trying to come to a decision. We're living in a changing world, and that's hence why we hear so much about AI at the moment. Look, we're living in change. Just think about that. AI is a tool that you will use in that change. It's a tool that will enable you, empower you, or not. There's a whole lot of other tools you need to build. And these are the tools that we're talking about at the moment. Build your change leadership. And we talked about in module 2. Change leadership is about people. It's about authenticity, and it's about building trust. If you can't build trust, you can't be an effective change leader, because you're leading people, and you need to, and you go back to that transition framework and look at what we talked about in our last session, number 3, which is the picture of success. That's where you want to finish up. And I was running a seminar last week, and it was a really interesting question was asked by one person in the seminar. They said, is external change, like state change that's forced upon you? They were working in a government department, and the government is saying that you need to change and reduce headcount and do a number of things. Is that change different to change that's internal, where the chief executive wakes up one morning and says, let's do change? And my answer was, maybe, but probably not. It's the same in the sense that people will be affected. I think the difference is when it's change that's being done where you have absolutely no control over it because it's really external. The key thing, as I said to this person, is focus on the people that you can work with. Focus on your team. Where it's change that's driven by internally, you can probably give a rationale and a picture of success that's driven by the internal organization. But both ways, it's about people, and it's about you having authenticity and building trust. And then we talked about, if you remember on page 20, that great diagram called, the comfort zone. Powerful, powerful, powerful diagram. It's one of my favorites because I hear so often, and we coach thousands of people a year, right? And all their coaches will tell me the same stuff. People go, oh, I don't think I could do that. Oh, I would fail. Oh, this, that, and everything else. But it's that fear zone. People are feeling the fear and going, no, I'm not going to do it. I got a real fear of heights and I can't swim. And a few years ago, we went on this course and it involved having to jump off a cliff into a waterfall. And me being me, a bit competitive, I went further up the cliff than where we needed to go to jump off. Now, there were two things that were sort of really in my mind. One was, I don't like heights much, and I certainly can't swim, and I'm going to jump into a waterfall. So this has got all the makings of a disaster. A lot of fear, a lot of fear. But I thought, I'm going to do it, so I did it. I was the first person to do it, and it worked. It was amazing. I went up and did it 3 times. And in the finish, everybody was coming up and doing the same thing. And it was interesting because the first time I can't remember much about it. The second time, I was now aware of what was happening. The third time, it felt like it took 10 minutes to go from the top to the bottom, which of course it didn't. It was probably about 60 seconds, if that. It was an interesting example of feeling the fear. I did skydiving as well, tandem skydiving, same thing. Same thing. It was facing your fear and pushing through it. In fact, we went and did 3 more skydiving after that. So it was into that learning zone, and then that learning zone becomes the growth zone. If you train yourself to push through things that challenge you, which is, say, that fear zone, if you push through those, all of a sudden you learn stuff and you become comfortable and you go into that growth zone. What happens is your comfort zone gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So I think to do that, it's wise to have a practice. So today, we want to talk about some really interesting things. If you go to page 24 and 25, we want to talk about goal setting. Now, it's one of the things I think organizations, teams, and individuals often go, I want to set goals and do stuff, and don't. We have a strategic planning program, which is the best I've ever seen. I've ran it for 31 years. I developed it 31 years ago. It's called Vision to Action. It's a strategic plan process that works. It absolutely works in every organization that we put it into. It works. Why? It's because it follows the principles of what we're going to talk about here today around how you set goals and achieve them. So I think the first thing with goals is the goals need to be in a SMART context. So let's look at this really great acronym called SMART. You'll all be familiar with it. You will have all heard about it. So the first thing is the goal needs to be specific. It needs to be specific. So what makes that vision to action work? Well, it's because one of the things that we do at the beginning of the strategy, let's imagine you said we want to improve customer service. Let's imagine. You wouldn't say that, but it's just for the purposes today. We want to improve customer service. First thing we do in our vision to action planning session is we go, okay, let's define customer and let's define customer service. And you know what? You go around a room of, say, 10 people and ask for 10 definitions of customer service, you're going to get 10 different answers. Why is that a problem? Well, because it means you've got 10 different people going in 10 different directions with all good intent. They're all trying to do the very best they can, but one person's going that way, one person's going that way, one person's going that way. One person could be saying, well, great customer service is solving problems. Another person could be, well, we answer the phone within 60 seconds. Another person goes something else and so forth, so that you get a common agreement a common agreement, let's imagine, on what is customer service, and everybody in that room needs to agree on it. So it becomes very specific. Everybody knows what customer service is. They've agreed, they've written it down, it's defined. Second part is it needs to be measurable. So you can't just say we're going to improve customer service. You're going to go by what and how. And you could be going, okay, we've defined customer service is resolving problems, right? Let's imagine. And you go, well, how are we going to actually measure that? And you're going, well, all problems will be resolved within 3 working days. Let's imagine. Very specific. And it enables you to match that. I remember a few years ago, I was talking to a manager who had taken over this contact center. He hadn't had much experience in contact centers. And he said, like, what I've done is, he said, I've changed the KPIs. I've bonused everybody on actually being able to answer the phone within 35 seconds. I said, wow, you know, because they were terrible. They'd been terrible in the past. And he'd come in, new broom. I said, how's that going? He said it was going great. He said for about 3 weeks, everybody was hitting, 34 seconds. We were amazing. He said everybody was getting bonused. He said it was amazing. Then he said, I found out what was happening. We had a lot of the supervisors sitting there and they were watching. And so when the call hit around about 32 seconds, they just cut the call off and the person had to ring back. So they started again. And I said, so that didn't work, did it? And he goes, no, it didn't. So I think the key thing is be very specific, but look at it in a specific context that is valid for your business and that is practical and workable. Also, look at it being realistic, achievable. I was talking to a person, it was about a couple of years ago, from a gym, big gym chain, and he said, we do really, really well in January and February. And I go, why is that? And he goes, everybody's got New Year's resolutions, I'm going to go to the gym 4 days a week for 1 hour every day. And is that realistic and achievable? No, because he said, they'll come about 3 times and then don't come. And he said, we're doing okay because they've bought themselves like a 3-month membership and may turn up 4 or 5 times. And that's human nature. I remember I had a dad-daughter day with my daughter, and she's really focused on trying to build a business. And she said, so what is the secret of building a business, Dad? And I said, well, try to build a goal that you know what the goal is, but then don't focus on that goal. Come back and go, what are the micro actions I need to undertake? The micro actions I need to undertake to actually start working towards that goal. So let's imagine, instead of saying I need to go to the gym 4 days a week and for an hour each, I said, I want to get fit, right? I want to get fit over the next 6 months. I want to get fit, and then very clearly define under specific what fit is, right? I might lose 3 kilos and be able to do yoga poses. I don't know, but whatever it may be, define it. So I said to her, what you do is you define the goal, and then you come back and you say, what is a micro action that helps me get towards the goal? So I said, it could be that you start off by saying, my micro action is I want to move for 10 minutes every day. And she goes, what do you mean, move? I said, well, you could jump on the spot. You could go for a walk. You could wave your arms in the air for 10 minutes. That's moving for 10 minutes. And she goes, oh. And I said, so what do you think would happen when you did that? She goes, well, you get sick of it and you want to do something better. And I said, yeah, because now what you're doing is you've created a habit that every day you're going to move for 10 minutes. And pretty soon you're going to be going, well, that's my habit. I need to move today. I'll go for a walk. And then you might find you're actually walking for 45 minutes. So that then creates behaviors. So micro actions create habits. Habits create behaviors. Behaviors create the goal. So that's the secret of making it realistic, defined, measurable, precise, and specific. And make sure it's aligned to your life and career direction. Like if you've got, say, 3 kids under the ages of 5 and you think you're going to go to the gym every day for an hour, I would imagine you're going to have some challenges in doing that, probably from your partner who's going to be going, well, hang on, how am I going to manage all these kids while you're heading off to the gym? So make sure it's aligned to your career direction. And often I find the reason that goals don't get achieved is because sometimes they're not aligned. You're not passionate about them. You're not driven. It was fascinating. A friend of mine said to me a while back, they said, you're very linear and sometimes in your thinking, but you're also very innovative and creative. How do you work that two things together? I said, well, what do you mean? I don't quite understand. They said, well, if I said to you, what are you going to do over the next 6 months? You could probably tell me. I mean, yeah, pretty much. And they said, so you have it planned out. Like, in other words, I'm going to go to the gym and focus on the gym entirely. I go, well, there could be times when I do that, but not necessarily, because I'm looking at trying to keep a balance or a harmony. I'm not a big fan of the word balance because I don't think we can ever achieve it. It's more like a harmony. And then put in the dates. Now, one of the reasons that Vision to Action always works is because it has dates in it. Dates. Not third quarter. That doesn't work, doesn't compute with your brain. You put in 29th of September, I will have achieved that. And why it works in that strategic planning Vision to Action tool that we have is because if you agree to do it and you don't do it, you're a promise breaker. And the moment you use a word that is loaded with emotion, like being a promise breaker, you can use it to yourself or use it externally. You go, hang on, whoa, whoa, whoa. So the options you've got is, I need to talk to all the stakeholders and go, I can't achieve that by the 29th of September. And they can say to you when, and you might go 29th of October, and you go, they will go fine, then you can do it. Why most strategic planning fails is because there's no dates and there's no accountability around those dates. So one of the key things I think that's very, very important when you're looking at building goal setting, set down goals that motivate you. Goals that don't motivate you won't work. Now, why do you have to do that? Because it's human nature. If I wanted to become an All Black and I didn't want to train, then I'm probably never going to become an All Black. But you listen to the stories, and I was listening to the stories of Duplessis Kirifi, who started as a ball boy at Yarrow Stadium in New Plymouth as a 6 or 7 year old kid. And his whole life has been focused on becoming an All Black, and he has now. So it's things that motivate you. Like if you said to Duplessis Kirifi, you need to get out of bed at 5:30 and go for a run, because by doing that, you'll become an All Black. You'd probably get out of bed and do it. And that goal would be achieved. But if you set yourself goals that don't motivate you, or if you set your team goals that don't motivate the team, the same thing. Now, we come back to what we covered in the first two modules. How do you motivate a team? It's because you build a picture of what success looks like. That 3 that we covered in the last module. Look at 3 and go, okay, what does that picture of success look like? And what do we need to do from a SMART goal perspective to get to that, to make that achievable? So set them down in writing. Writing is really important. And I'm also very, very keen that when you set them down in writing, define them. Define whatever it is that you are going to try and achieve. Define them. Have an action plan and review it and reflect. Like, one of the things that I find fascinating is lots of people think that plans are like a linear, they're like a straight road. They're not. And I may have mentioned in the earlier modules, one of the key things about building a life practice is work out where your north is. What is north for you in terms of your life, your career, your health, your whānau, your relationships? Work out what north looks like and define it, because when you know where you're going, you'll get blown off course. And I like the concept of north, because we all get blown off course, but we always know how to get back onto north because we got a compass. Our compass is what we want to achieve out of our life, out of our career, for our health and our relationships. So dreams plus reality at the bottom of 25, dreams plus reality plus commitment equals success. Very rarely have I seen people be highly successful who don't have dreams. But we all know lots of dreamers who don't have reality. And it's the combination of dreams, reality, and commitment creates success. So I think I go back to that model that I shared with Maggie, my daughter. I call her the princess because she pretty much is. And she wrote it down. She sat in the car as we were going up, and she typed it all down, and then she rang me the next day and went through it again. Start with micro actions. Micro actions create habits. Habits create behaviors, and behaviors will get you to your goals. So if you think about the example I gave, it's a lot easier to move for 10 minutes a day than go to the gym 4 times a week for 1 hour. But I could probably guess that if you did that for a month of doing 10 minutes a day moving, I would guess that probably within 4 to 6 weeks, you've decided to go to the gym and spend an hour at the gym. And you might not be doing 4 days a week, you might be doing 3 days a week, but you'll be at the gym because now you have got a picture of what success is. You're passionate about what it is. You've created it as a habit, and it's now something that you're going to start seeing results from. So that's goals. Now we come to my favorite. This is one of my favorite tools that you can use as a high performance manager, as a coach. You can use it in your personal life. This is a great tool called SBI. Now, many of you may have used SBI. A lot of people haven't. And one of the things that we see in New Zealand is we don't like conflict a lot. Kiwis don't like, as a culture thing, we don't like conflict. I'm not suggesting that you should, right? But a lot of the conflict that managers and coaches walk away from is perceived problems, right? I've got to have a chat to Terry because at that presentation yesterday, Terry interrupted me, took the whole presentation off course, and really he should have just kept quiet and listened. Let's imagine that was the scenario, Terry interrupting. So you think, well, when I'm going to have a meeting with Terry and say to Terry, well, I don't think you should have interrupted me yesterday, it tends to get a bit emotional. It tends to get a bit personal. It tends to get, hang on, Terry's going, you're criticizing me. It was a good idea, and I should have the ability to put forward my opinion and have my opinion heard. And you go, well, I don't have a problem with that. So now it becomes a rather difficult conversation. We call them challenging conversations. There's a tool that you can use called SBI, which stands for, as you've got it there on page 27, Situation, Behavior, Impact. And I'll talk about that in a moment. So it's, if there's been a problem and there's been something that you need to address with a person, then use this tool. It's a great way to manage challenging conversations, to reframe them, which is what we talked about in module 1, reframe your thinking around it. But there's a secret to how you do this. The secret is you need to do it immediately, but you need to sit and think and prepare. 2 things that I've seen in our coaching that happen, people either don't do it immediately and do it sort of 3 or 4 days later. By that stage, they've worked up a bit of a head of steam around the whole thing. You know, I was just really annoyed that Terry interrupted that presentation. So when I sit down and have a conversation with Terry about it, I'm like, I'm exuding a little bit of anger, frustration, or whatever it may be. I'm exuding some kind of emotion. And if Terry's sitting there, he's going to pick up on that and go, seriously? So that's the thing that happens. Or people go into a conversation and they make it personal. They go, Terry, you always do this. You always interrupt in presentations. And Terry's going, well, I don't always do it. Well, yeah, I did it the other day, but I don't always do it. You can't say, I always did it. So those are the 2 things I think that happen often, that we get feedback in coaching. As a result of that, people don't like giving feedback. They just don't. And so they tend to avoid feedback, and they go fine, nice, and all that sort of stuff, you know, and then go away and have a mutter about it on the side. So this is a great tool. It's a great tool. I've had people I've coached who have used SBI. They've said to me in the finish, oh, I love challenging conversations. And I go, really? And they go, yeah, they're just really good. I can go into them now and I have these great chats. And I go, great. Isn't that powerful? Isn't that really nice when you can go in and instead of getting into emotive, combative, or conflictual kind of situation, you're going in and you're getting constructive and growth and real coaching conversations going on. I had one person in a major organization, he did this. He rang me about a week later. He said, Terry, that SBI is a fantastic tool. And I said, please, how are you using it? He said, well, I haven't used it at work. He said, well, I do, but the big change was with my 16-year-old son. He said, I used to go into his room and go bonkers at him around the mess that his room was in. And he said, of course, that didn't work, did it? So he said, I sat down and I tried SBI with him. And he said, funnily enough, it actually worked, So how does it work? Firstly, you describe the situation, right? So if we go back to the Terry example, interrupting in a presentation, you go, Terry, the situation was we were making a presentation to Survey and Spatial. I had the presentation planned out. It was following a very constructive linear pattern to actually bring Survey and Spatial along with the thinking that I was wanting to get across to them. The behavior, and then you go, however, you interrupted the presentation, got it off track, we lost the pattern that we had. And the impact, so you talk about the consequences, the impact was that presentation never got across the message that we were trying to achieve. And the person goes, well, I don't agree. Terry might go, well, I don't agree. I was just trying to do such a, yes, but the situation was, it was a presentation. It was not a conversation. And so you go back to the situation, you talk about the behavior and the impact of the behavior. And so the person initially will probably put up emotive arguments to try and justify it. But if you continuously stick with the situation, the behavior, and the impact, after a while, the person will go, okay, I understand what you're saying. And you go, yeah. So I'm not criticizing you. You're not criticizing the individual. What you are saying, though, that the behavior was not acceptable. The behavior was not acceptable in that situation, and this is the impact. I've used this many, many times. I've seen teams use it. I've seen transformation in teams when managers start to use SBI to have challenging conversations. There will be times, of course, when it goes off the rails. I've had people that are coaching ring me and go, Terry, it didn't work. And I go, well, what happened? Did you stick with SBI? Well, yeah, I did. Did you do the preparation? Well, I was in a bit of a hurry. Generally, it's the preparation's not done. You need to do the preparation. You need to be very clear in your mind. What is the situation? What was the behavior? What was the impact? And if you want to add on something, if it's serious, you can add on consequence, But in situations where you've done the prep and you stick simply to facts, you don't get into emotive, you don't get into talking about that individual person, ultimately you'll start having a really good conversation with them. There's always exceptions, of course, where people go, no, not interested. But those are people who probably ultimately have issues wider than what you're going to be talking about. So if you turn over to page 28, on 28, you've got something around there that helps you build a framework that you can use for your situation, behavior, impact. What is the problem or constraint I need to address? What will I say in my opening statement? What would be an ideal outcome? That's important. Go back to module 2, where we talked about event, response, and outcome. Work out the outcome. You can't change the event. The event's happened. Your response is SBI. That R in that E plus R equals O, that is SBI. So work out what outcome you'll get by using SBI, or the outcome you want. What are the barriers that stand in the way? One of the big barriers is what I would call hot points, pressure points. So like if you looked at me and said, when I'm having a challenging conversation, if anybody wanted to press my button, yeah, let's call it the button, it's around not taking ownership. If somebody said, well, it's not my problem, that I would have to be very careful in an SBI coaching conversation when somebody said, it isn't my problem, tough. Because I know that is one of my trigger points. That's a button. I don't like people not taking responsibility. So I'd have to be very careful here and say, that's a barrier. I need to work out how I will handle that, because I know probably that is something that this person may say in this conversation. How do I deal with it? You anticipate some of the barriers, and particularly those barriers that are going to be pressure points. They're going to be trigger points. They're going to be, when people say them, you're going to go reaction. And the moment you react, you go into emotion. The moment you go into emotion, it all goes off course. Work out what questions you will ask. And there's generally the why, what, and where. And we've got some questions at the end of the module today that you can use. But work out those questions of, well, why did you, if we go back to the Terry presentation thing, but why did you feel it was important to interrupt the presentation to ask that question? And they go, well, I felt that everybody needed to know about it. Why did you feel everybody needed to know? Because it was not apparent to me. Well, etc. And then ultimately you keep asking the questions that will lead them to realize the behavior probably wasn't the wisest. How many questions will I ask? Well, that depends. Don't do too many, because otherwise it sounds like you're just interrogating. What is at stake? That's the impact. What is at stake? That's the impact. This is how it affected other people. This is how it affected that presentation. This is how it affected me. And how can I keep the conversation based on facts rather than emotions? Anticipate your trigger points. We've all got them. So, and then work out how you're going to manage that. What commitment will I ask for? What am I willing to do? And I think that's always it's a very, very good way to address some of the issues by saying, okay, so in future, what can we agree upon that will happen in those similar situations? And Terry might go, okay, I need to respect your space in the presentation, if we're using that example. And they go, well, this presentation was really close to my heart and I was never consulted on it. And then you might go, well, okay, my bad, I should be talking to you if I'm going to do a presentation like this to get your input as well. So those are the kind of conversations that you can have, which become very, very, very constructive. Key things that we want to do to be able to do that is to listen properly. And that's a big one, eh? So let's go to the exciting levels of listening on page 29. Now, you may agree or disagree on this, but I'm going to share with you my observations around listening. So there's 5 levels of listening. One is no listening, and we don't often come across that, or sometimes we do. It depends on, who you're working with, who you live with, the situations you're in. But no listening is never good. It's never good. Number 2 is listening to tell my story, and number 3 is listening to agree or disagree. Now, I was brought up in a very Irish influenced family. My ancestors are all Irish. I'm a 4th generation Kiwi, but Irish on both sides. A very strong Irish element. So we tend to tell stories, and we tend to listen to agree or disagree. So my ex-wife, she came from Trinidad in the Caribbean, and they're very gentle people. They're gentle people. So the first time she came down to my home, I come from down Ashburton, Methven Way. She said to me, why does your brother really hate you? I go, well, he doesn't. And she goes, yeah, but you're talking about rugby. And he said, you know nothing about it. You never will. I said, look, he's a Crusaders fan. I back the Blues. So he's always going to be critical and listening to agree. No, not really. If it's about the Blues and you're a Crusaders fan, he's going to be listening to disagree. And she said, yeah, but he got fairly agitated. And I said, yeah, but That's how we are. If he didn't, I'd be worried that how does he express his feelings and emotions? So cultural differences mean you listen in different ways. But I was brought up probably listening to tell my story, listening to agree or disagree. So that is my default. I'm not saying it's a good default. I'm just saying that is my default. And we all have those. They come from a background, from where we come from. To be effective as a leader and to be effective as a coach and to be effective in being able to go through that comfort zone is you have to change how you listen. You can't listen to agree or disagree if you want to get buy-in from people. You have to have active listening. So active listening is listening to understand. Listening to understand. What is that old saying? I've got 2 eyes and 2 ears and 1 mouth, and I should use them in that ratio type of thing. I forget who said that. I think it was Stephen Covey or somebody said that. It's a challenge because like I've had to learn to listen differently because where I come from, I'm number 2 and number 3. And yeah, sure, if I went into a pub and caught up with some of my wider whānau, we'd probably do 2 and 3. That would be what we would do. I'd slip into that. But when I'm coaching, I've got to actually actively go to 5. And also at times go to 4. Because there are times when people come to you and they go, I don't know what to do. Now, what I'd be saying when they say, I don't know what to do, is saying, would you like me to give you my opinion on what you should do? And they would go, yeah, that's why I'm talking to you. So you'd do number 4. But it's catching yourself as you move up and down. So I don't think anybody's going to sit in one of these. I mean, there are certain people who will sit in 5 all the time. There's probably people who sit in 1 all the time. But I think the thing is that we probably all move up and down depending on circumstances. Like in a social situation, you're not going to be sitting in 5 all the time. You might occasionally, might be sitting, listening, talking to somebody. But as I said, if you were talking rugby in a pub with my whānau, you'd probably be sitting in 3 and 2. Or maybe 4. You'd be describing what the various players should have been doing. So I think the big thing here with the steps of successful listening is being able to understand your default, what you default to, and then understanding how you move from that default upwards and how you go backwards. And when you're an SBI, remember, if people press your button, under button, you revert to learned behavior. Under pressure, you will revert to learned behavior. So unless you've actually changed your learned behavior by going, okay, I know what's happening here, I'm still going to keep listening. And so like if I was in a situation where I was using SBI and somebody was pressing my button, rather than listening to agree or disagree on number 3, I'd probably go to 5 and ask more questions, because that's forcing that person to describe why they're saying what they're saying, the reasons why they're saying it, the reasons how they feel about it, and then I can listen to understand. Once I understand, I can move back to 3 if I choose. But I may actually go to 4 and offer applications. Generally, applications will only work in a listening context if you have permission. So you just don't sit there and go, look, this is what I'd be doing. You'd be going, do you mind if I tell you what I would do? And if they would go yes, or if they go no. So I think, it's about knowing how we move up and down those. That's the secret to that. And the other part that we can use, where we got on page 30, is understanding, how you get understanding through active listening. So first thing about active listening is asking questions and keeping quiet to hear what the person's saying. Reflective listening is also powerful because it helps clarify the understanding. So it's got there, you can repeat back and paraphrase, but don't paraphrase it too much. So if somebody said, go back to our Terry example in the presentation, I felt you were misrepresenting what we were able to do. Let's imagine. And you would go, okay, so you felt that my explanation was not representative of what we could do. And they would go, yeah, that's what I'm saying. And then you could have a conversation around that. Don't paraphrase it to the degree where you're going, so you're saying I didn't know what I was talking about. Because then you're going into that emotive territory. You're going to start off in another tangent. Paraphrase. So if a person spent a minute giving you an answer, you could paraphrase it down to sort of 30 or 40 seconds. And when the person listens to what you're paraphrasing back, or repeating back, or reflecting back to them, what happens in their mind? They go, you actually heard what I said. You actually understand what I said. Wow, I am heard. And we all know that's one of the most powerful things that a human can deal with, is being heard. Another part of that really powerful act of listening is acknowledging feelings. If we go back to the Terry example again in the presentation, I'm not having a very good day here, am I? And it's like, I could have said, well, I felt that you weren't explaining it correctly. It's been my project, and you never consulted me about it. And I felt pretty annoyed about the fact that you didn't even have the courtesy to speak to me. Let's imagine. And you could go, I can see why you feel that way. And yes, I did not consult you. These are the reasons why. So I'm sorry, but in future I will, or whatever. So acknowledge feelings, because there's that technique called deplugging. The moment that you acknowledge some feelings genuinely, don't do it if you're not genuine, and if it's not realistic. But the moment you acknowledge that, people go, okay, that's fair enough. You know, there's always going to be the odd person who doesn't, but most people are very reasonable and go, yeah. And again, is if you are getting feedback in a conversation that you don't understand, ask the clarifying question. Go, can you help me understand why you think that? Because at the moment, I don't understand it, or I'm not sure that I do get my head around it, or whatever. So you keep asking questions to get clarity, and be very upfront about it. Be very upfront. And down there, again, as we said at the bottom, the key concept, listening is greatly influenced by behavior styles, by yours and others. So be aware. That's why preparation for SBI is really important. So let's look at the 3 steps for successful listening. The 3 steps for successful listening is down there, looking at resistance statements, get acknowledgement, clarity, and response. Those are the 3 steps. Listening is understanding, see the whole. So acknowledgement is building empathy, and it enables a person to be heard. Clarity is your active listening. You are actually trying to understand, and if you can reflect that back to that person, immediately that person feels a sense of empathy with you. And respond with relevant suggestions, and respond, I believe, with constructive actions that you both will take in future. So it becomes a behavior change. This is the core part of coaching. Core part of coaching is being able to understand where you are going to have resistance, which is when we're building the SBI statements, plan around that. What will be the statements that will be resistance statements, like, I don't agree with you, or I'm not comfortable doing that, or I don't think their goal's reasonable. And then you might go, well, but you did agree that the goal was reasonable when we agreed on it 2 months ago. Yes, but things have changed. But you haven't spoken to me, have you, about why you don't think it's reasonable? You've just not done it. And so those are the conversations. And going back to the vision to action I talked about, it's always fascinating when we run that, because a lot of people are used to agreeing to something, trying to do it, and then if it doesn't work, they just don't achieve it, and it's okay. Now, vision to action, you can't do that, because you made a promise. And if you haven't come back and talked about it, or said reason you can't do it, and got the dates changed, then you're a promise breaker. And the moment you use a word like that to people, people go, ooh, that's a bit strong. And you go, but there's not. It's how we should be living our lives. If you make a promise, that goes back to what we talked about in Module 1, authenticity. It's about building trust. If you can't build trust around what you agree to do, then you have a challenge. You have a real challenge about building and mastering high performance. So having better conversations, some really simple things which we all know, and it's a matter of making sure that we follow them, is don't multitask when you're having a conversation. If you have a conversation with somebody, they are the center of your attention. Do not preach. Ask questions. Try to get understanding. And ask the open-ended questions. We've got some of them here for you to use if you wish at the end of this module. Go with the flow, but be prepared. Now, nothing is ever going to go as you planned it. Who was it that it was, I think, it was one of the boxers, wasn't it, who said, no great plan survives the first punch in the face. Tyson, I think it might have been Mike Tyson. And then number 5, if you do not know, say that you don't know. Don't do the stuff that you try to make up it as you go, because people are smart and people pick it up and you'll get caught out. And if you get caught out and you don't know it, you have lost trust. You're not being authentic. So be authentic and say, look, I don't know that. I can find it out and we can sit down and talk about it again in another session. Remember that everybody comes from different levels of experience. People come from different behavior patterns. They come from different perspectives. So like, as I say, I was brought up in a strongly Irish familial background. Now, somebody like my ex-wife who come out of Trinidad, which are nice, kind, gentle people, they found a lot of what would go on in our family to be a little bit confrontational. And yet when I went over there, I felt that they were just too gentle and too easygoing. And, you know, the favorite saying in Trinidad is, well, I'll get round to doing that just now, man. And that meant, you know, and I'm like, now when? Give me a date, because it doesn't work. So part of that is we all come from different cultures, different backgrounds, different perspectives. It's about being able to understand that and to be able to reflect that in our conversations. Don't repeat yourself. Stay out of the weeds. Don't get into the weeds. The weeds are just something that get you right off track. Stick. That's why SBI is good. Situation, behavior, impact. Don't get into the fact of, well, this is what was happening that day, and this is what would happen. And, you know, I've been asked to do that in the morning, and go, no, stop. We're not talking about what happened before or after or during. We're talking about the situation, that behavior, and that impact in that particular case. Listen, be brief, sum it up. Sum it up in a reflective listening style. So good communication is the bridge between confusion and clarity. Good communication is the bridge between confusion and clarity. And any of you who have been in any kind of relationship with anybody knows that often we can be talking at cross purposes to each other, all with good intent, but we can be talking at cross purposes. I know I've done it. I sit there and go, oh, I didn't realize that you were talking about that. And they go, yeah. And why? Why did I not realize that? Probably because I wasn't actively listening, because I wasn't asking the questions, or because my attention wasn't on that particular conversation we were having at that time. So this is great. It is great for you personally. It's great for your teams. It's about how you begin to build a mastery of performance by becoming a really, really good coach. And it's around that ability to handle and manage challenging conversations. So one of the key things in those challenging conversations that I mentioned is the ability to ask open-ended questions. Great quote at the bottom of page 33 from Claude Strauss. Wisdom is not the right answers, it's asking the right questions. I love that one because it is so true. Wisdom is not the right answers, it's asking the right questions. And one of the great journeys, if you go back to that comfort zone, one of the great learnings I've had is that when you get to ask the right questions, you sit back at times and go, wow, I never thought about it from that perspective. Wow, that's interesting. If I thought about it like that, I would have done something different. So some of the questions you've got there on page 33 and on 34 is questions that are really, really good, I think, that you can use. What is on your mind? And what else? Now, what I'm going to say here now is important. Build your own question library. Build your own question library. Because some people can ask, and what else? Me, I probably couldn't. It would sound a little too direct. It would sound a little bit confrontational coming from me. A really, really great people person, like our National Business Director, Andy McCormick, great people person, he could ask that question, and what else? And it would sound really, really natural. So build the questions that resonate with you. What is the real challenge here for you? What do you want? How can I help? What option are you saying yes to, and what are you saying no to? What are you going to do now? And what are you going to do now? Or what are the next steps? Or what should we be looking at doing next? So asking the right question is the most important part of thinking. I was asked a while back, what do I think one of the biggest challenges we have today? I talked about it when we started today, is decision making. The other one is curiosity. We have lost curiosity. We should be asking questions about stuff, trying to understand stuff. The world around us is changing faster than ever before. Ask questions, because questions will inform us with information and knowledge that we can process and make judgments from. And I see so often that we make assumptions without asking the question. We make assumptions without understanding what that assumption is based on, because we haven't been sufficiently curious. So what I'm suggesting, go back and reflect on this over the next few days before we come back and have module 4, and work out if you can use SBI in a work context or in a personal context. Prepare, look at where your default listening levels are, and look at how you shift and move between those levels to get the best outcomes. And most of all, be curious. Ask questions to understand. Ask questions to understand. Build your own question library. And make those questions library part of where you come from, and knowing how they reflect. As I say, what else is not a question I would ever use, because it would sound it would not resonate with me, and it wouldn't come across naturally. So build your own library, ones that resonate with you, ones that work for you. So that wraps us up for today. I'd like to say thanks, everybody. We'll see you again next week for module 4. Any questions you've got, please shoot them through to Jenny, and I'm very happy to answer them. And if you've got anything you want to talk about, send us an email, terry@futurepathworld.com. Very happy to email you back or give you a call. So thanks very much, everybody. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Terry, for your presentation today. And thanks also to all of our members who have given up your lunch hour, I presume, just to listen into Terry's live stream. I'm sure that you got a lot out of that. So thank you, everybody. And we look forward to seeing you online again for module 4 of this series, which is next Wednesday, the 13th of August. Thanks, everyone.
See you. Take care. Thank you.